I enjoy talking about cameras. I've got the creaky gaming chair. I got to return this, but I got a question the other day, and it was somebody writing about one of the videos I did about the Sony AX53. That's what I'm recording this on. The question was, thanks for your review of the camera. I was wondering, now that it's 2018, do you recommend a different 4K camera for the same job? Vlogging, YouTube, etc. So I'm going to sit back here and just prattle on for a little bit. Please indulge me. All right. I'm very satisfied with the AX53. As far as I'm concerned, there's not a consumer 4K camcorder out there that comes close to the capability of this particular camera. And that's because of the balanced optical steady shot system on it. I think it produces outstanding video. It's a fairly light camera. It can record at 1080p up to 120 frames per second for super slow-mo. I'm shooting this particular video today, 1080p at 60 frames per second. Rather than 4K. It's going to be a kind of a long video, so save some space on there. Some people say they like the look of 60 frames per second, but regardless, as far as a camcorder, let's talk about vlogging for just a second. I've tried my hand, and I'm going to say this in the very beginning. I'm not a camera expert, never claimed to be, but I own a lot of cameras. I've got 2 DSLRs, one semi-professional camcorder, and this consumer camcorder. I have owned several bridge cameras. So cameras have always been a big part of my life for many, many years. So I know my way around them, but I'm not an expert. But I want to say this. When you turn to YouTube for expert advice, there's a number of channels out there, I think, that try to point you in that whole DSLR world for film or for video. And the camcorder has been really ignored in the marketplace for a long time. The smartphone, I think, has taken the place of the typical camcorder for a lot of people. That's their camcorder on the go. But the camcorder, in my opinion, has gotten short shift over the years in favor of DSLRs, mirrorless cameras, and even some higher end point and shoots. But let's talk about any kind of camera other than a camcorder. They first and foremost have been designed for what? To take photographs, and then video is an added extra. The ergonomics of the cameras are centered around the photographer. Many of the features are photographic centric, but yes, a number of people do use them to take video. What's the basic? Well, when you listen to these guys on YouTube that have made channels teaching others how to vlog and what kind of gear and so forth that they use, they always come back to just a few basic points. The interchangeable lens and getting nice bokeh, right? And then some of them will get a little bit more esoteric and start talking about things like color science or super high frame rates. But typically, the argument always boils down to the ability to swap out lenses, getting that nice, beautiful bokeh, going for that cinematic look. And when it comes to vlogging, here's what I think is important. The first and foremost is to be able to compose the shot quickly. In other words, having a flip out screen so you can see yourself, make sure you're in frame, is super important. And a lot of the Sony A6500s, all those models don't have that type of screen. So I rule those kind of things out. If you're vlogging, you want to be able to quickly hold it up and see yourself in there. You might as well forget most of the Sony stuff. But There is one particular Sony camera I would recommend you consider for vlogging, and that's the RX Mark V. Now, yes, there's a RX Mark VI, but the Mark V, the price has come down. They still shoot 4K. Sony puts a lot of their great technology into that camera. It has like a 24 millimeter, 35 millimeter equivalent lens on it. It's got some zoom range on it. It's small, fit in your pocket, very lightweight and not obtrusive. That's another thing about vlogging cameras, okay? I have a Canon 70D. I would never dream of vlogging with that camera. By the time you have like a Joby Gorilla Pod and you have the Rode Video Mic Pro on there and you have this big rig, you stick out like a sore thumb. It's a heavy system. You don't want to be dragging that thing around. So being able to see yourself, job number one. Job number two, and equally important, is fast autofocus. And this is where both Sony and Canon cameras really shine, is in their autofocus systems. The Canon with their dual pixel AF, Sony uses phase detection AF, much like the Canon. Both are generally has super fast autofocus, and that's super important to have that autofocus. So we've established a fact for vlogging. You need to be able to have a flip up or flip out screen to see yourself. You need to have fast autofocus. And generally, you want a lightweight, non-obtrusive camera, something you whip out and start recording pretty easily. It doesn't require a lot of futzing around with. That's another thing. When these guys start talking about DSLRs, next thing you know, they're talking about lenses, setting up all in manual mode, learning all this stuff there. When you should be out creating a story, you should be out creating a content. I think ease of use is really underrated. I don't think a lot of, I mean, yeah, if you love gear and cameras and you really want to get into all the nuts and bolts, but getting the shot is what's really important. Taking, I don't care how great you are with manipulating the camera and getting the bokeh and all that. If you miss the shot or that essential part of the story, then, it's all for nothing. Some people have created entire movies with their smartphones. But when we talk about vlogging, and then you mentioned YouTube video, so can we all agree that there's not one camera out there on the market that meets everybody's checklist? There's always something lacking that prevents you from having that ideal camera. You mentioned 4K. Right now, 4K is absolutely not necessary for great storytelling or for great looking video. And if you have 4K, this is a 4K camera. The camera, I have a semi-pro Sony AX100 camera for now shooting my reviews. But for vlogs and for most video, 4K is really more about, in my opinion, more about making it look like I have multiple camera angles by zooming in on a particular frame or set of, a certain range of video in the edit. Gives me that kind of latitude as opposed to shooting straight in 1080p. A friend of mine, Joe from Joe's Photo and Video, I put a link to his channel on here, even mentioned that a true 4K camera, like the AX53, actually can do a better job than a 1080p with the DSLR with a big sensor on it because of what's called pixel binning. The sharpness in the detail is much better. But you can still, down-res. I mean, that's another thing. You shoot at 4K and then down-res the output of the video to 1080p. I'm not trying to get overly technical with you here, but when we really talk about what that ideal camera that can do both vlogging and general-purpose YouTube videos and do it all in one camera, there's really not such an animal Now let's talk about vlogging with a camcorder. What is it that the DSLR mirrorless camera people why they ignore the camcorder? And they ignore it, as I said, because they complain about bokeh. They say camcorders, they can't get the bokeh. Camcorders don't allow you to change lenses, don't give you that kind of flexibility. You're stuck with one lens. Anything else? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And I say that you can most certainly vlog with the camcorder. And if you learn how to tweak some settings in the camcorder, you might be able to get some bokeh out of it. I know with the X100, I can get nice bokeh out of it. Oh, another thing they complain about is the low light performance of the camera, because they typically have small sensors. The AX53 has a 1/2 0.3-inch sensor. It is small, but yet it can do a pretty decent job in low light. Is it going to compare to a full frame big honking DSLR? Was it the 1DX Mark II? No, it's not. But it's going to do a very good job in most low light situations. And so you can absolutely vlog with this camera. You can absolutely use it under a wide variety of things. Now, it's got a 24, that's another thing about the lenses, okay? If you're going to do a lot of, have that camera in your face, you want an ultra wide angle lens, you can't really get that with this camera, and that's part of the deal. But you can also get wide angle lens adapters for your camera, okay, your camcorder, and get that a little bit closer look. So you can most certainly do that, but not everybody's going to, vlog that particular way. To me, the vlog should be a lot about your environment, what's going on around you. My mouth gets really, really dry, especially this time of the year. But your to me, an interesting vlog isn't all about the vlogger having the camera pointed at their face most of the time. Anyway, I'm interested in personally of the environment going on around them. And 24, I think the AX53 is around 26 millimeter, 35 millimeter equivalent, full frame, equivalent, which is wide enough. And just have to hold it out a little bit more. It's not particularly heavy camera. But the other thing is, when you start talking to people about vlogging with a DSLR, what are you going to run into? Problems with stabilization. Okay, these guys are running around with really expensive gimbals now on there to get basically, I can get almost as good as stabilization with the built-in BOS system on this camera. And I don't need a stabilizer, okay? I can get very nice fluid handheld shots with this camera. My whole point of this video is, there's not one camera that's going to be all to end all and meet for vlogs and then, on the YouTube side, but I think the AX53 is certainly a good option. The Sony RX100 has got the same sensor, 1-inch sensor, I believe, as the Sony AX700, the NX80 and 90. I think it's got about the same, essentially the same 1-inch sensor. Here's the problem that you'll run into with that camera. I think you're limited to 5 minutes of 4K video, and also overheating is another issue. With this camera, I can sit and just talk and talk and talk, and it just won't overheat. And I'm talking continuous 4K 100 megabit, it won't overheat. It's got pretty good autofocus on it, pretty fast. It can run in full auto mode, or you can tweak out the settings for the ISO, for the aperture, for the shutter speed. You can do all that. It's got face tracking. So this is certainly a viable option. And I just really bugs me when these people are on there trying to look. A camcorder was designed to take video. The ergonomics are there. pick it up, point, shoot, go on your way. It really bothers me that some of them are trying to point everybody into DSLR and so forth, and when you should be a storyteller. Because that's what vlogging is all about, telling a story, creating your videos. So the AX53, absolutely. The Canon M50, great camera. And the RX100, a possibility. Thanks for watching.